A story begins thousands of years ago. A journey following the traces of ancient civilizations. Today we tell the story of the Roman Empire. Close your eyes comfortably and breathe slowly. Like a river of history flowing, the story flows gently, quietly, guarding your sleep. 753 years before Christ, a small village appeared in central Italy. The Tiber River wound through the land. The water flowed slowly, reeds swayed in the wind, and water birds flew overhead. 7 hills overlooked the river: Palatine Hill, Capitoline Hill, and 5 smaller hills. People began to gather on those hills. They built houses, cultivated fields, and raised livestock. It was a small village, but that place was the beginning of Rome. A legend is told. There were twin brothers, boys named Romulus and Remus, said to have inherited royal blood. But their uncle, who had seized the throne, was afraid. He placed the babies in a basket, sent them floating down the river, and waited for their death. The basket drifted along the river, carried by the current, passing through the reeds. It reached the foot of a hill. A she-wolf appeared. She heard the babies crying, approached them, nursed them, and cared for them. A shepherd found the children. He took them home and raised them, and the 2 brothers grew up healthy. When the brothers became adults, they learned of their birth. They defeated their uncle, restored their grandfather to the throne, and decided to build a new city. But they disagreed. Which hill to build the city on, who would be king? A quarrel arose. Romulus killed Remus, and he built the city alone. He called that city Rome, after his own name, the city of Romulus, Rome. This is legend, a story the Romans believed for over 1,000 years, a myth passed down with pride. The actual history is slightly different. Latin people settled on the hills. They herded livestock, farmed the land, and slowly formed a village. Etruscans came down from the north. They were people of advanced civilization, knew the techniques of building cities, and influenced Rome. Greek colonies were also nearby. Greeks lived on the southern Italian coast, traded, and transmitted their culture. Many cultures mixed. The language of the Latins, the skills of the Etruscans, the wisdom of the Greeks seeped into Rome. Time passes. The village became a city, kings ruled, and temples were built. 7 kings led Rome, for 244 years. From one generation to the next, the throne passed down. The first king Romulus laid the foundation of the city. The second king Numa Pompilius created religion and rituals, loved peace, and built temples. He chose prayer over war and gave Rome a time of quiet. The third king Tullus Hostilius was a warrior. He fought neighboring cities, expanded territory, and made Rome strong. The fourth king Ancus Marcius built a bridge. A wooden bridge was erected over the Tiber River. The 2 banks were connected, and trade flourished. The fifth king was from Etruria, a king with a long name Tarquinius Priscus, and people called him Tarquin. Tarquin began large-scale construction. He expanded temples, built drainage systems, and beautified the city. The sixth king Servius Tullius was a reformer. He built walls, divided citizens according to wealth, and created new systems. The 7th king appeared, Tarquinius Superbus, meaning Tarquin the Proud. He was a proud king. He monopolized power, ignored the Senate, and oppressed the people. He ruled through fear, killed those who opposed him, and plunged Rome into suffering. The nobles could not endure it. In 509 BC, the king's son dishonored a noblewoman, a woman named Lucretia, and having lost her honor, she took her own life. Rage exploded. The nobles revolted, drove out the king, and the monarchy collapsed. The Romans made a vow: we will never serve a king again. A new system began. The Republic, meaning belonging to the public, a state where citizens, not kings, were masters. Instead of a king, they elected 2 consuls. They ruled alternately for 1 year, checked each other, and prevented power from concentrating in one person. There was a Senate, a council composed of nobles. It made important decisions and led Roman policy. 300 senators wore white togas and gathered. Long debates continued, votes were taken, and laws were made. Commoners also raised their voices. They held assemblies, gathered opinions, and exercised voting rights. A position called tribune was created. A person who protected the rights of commoners, could veto decisions of nobles, and defended the people. But conflict was deep. Nobles owned much land, held power, and interpreted laws in their favor. Commoners were poor, burdened by debt, and felt it was unfair. Around 450 BC, the commoners demanded, "Write the laws so everyone can see them. Make laws that we can know, not just laws that nobles know." 10 commissioners were elected. They organized the laws, wrote them down, and engraved them on bronze tablets. The 12 tables were created. Laws were engraved on 12 bronze tablets, erected in the Forum Square, and made visible to all citizens. The content was simple. Rules about property, family, trials, and punishment, written in clear sentences. All are equal before the law. This principle was established, became the beginning of Roman law, and was passed down to later generations. Time passes. Rome began to move beyond being a small city. It fought with neighbors, won, and expanded its territory. The Latin League was formed. It allied with neighboring Latin cities, promised to help each other, and faced enemies together. But not everything was smooth. In 390 BC, Gauls came down from the north. Warriors wielding long swords, growing their hair long, and fighting with loud shouts. The Roman army faced them but was defeated. It was heavily defeated at the Battle of Velia. The army scattered, and the road to Rome opened. The Gauls entered Rome. They plundered the city, burned houses, and destroyed temples. The Romans fled to Capitoline Hill. They entered the citadel, closed the gates, and endured while besieged. At night, Gallic soldiers secretly climbed up. But the geese kept at the temple made noise. Roman soldiers awoke, and they repelled the enemy. A story was told that sacred geese saved Rome. Months later, the Gauls withdrew after receiving gold. Rome survived but suffered great wounds. The city became ashes, people despaired, and they vowed never to let this happen again. They began building walls. High and sturdy stone walls, encircling the entire city, extending over 11 kilometers. They called them the Servian Walls. They protected Rome for over 100 years, blocked enemy invasions, and maintained security. The army also grew stronger. They intensified training, improved weapons, and developed tactics. The Roman legion was created. Heavy infantry held shields and formed tight formations, fought with spears and swords, and maintained discipline. They began conquering the surroundings again. Over 300 years, slowly, little by little, they unified the Italian peninsula. Sometimes through war, sometimes through alliance, sometimes through negotiation, they expanded territory. They did not destroy conquered cities. Instead they made alliances, allowed self-government, and sometimes shared Roman citizenship. They built roads extending from Rome to each city, paved with stones to make them sturdy, not collapsing even in rain. The Appian Way was built. Construction began in 312 BC. It connected Rome to Capua in the south, and was called the Queen of Roads. Armies could move quickly, merchants transported goods, and news was delivered. All roads lead to Rome. This saying arose, became truth, and showed Rome's power. Time passes. Around 270 BC, Rome had unified most of the Italian peninsula, except for the Gallic regions in the north. To the southern tip, from the eastern coast to the western coast, all came under Roman influence. A small city-state had become a great power. But now it would face a new enemy. Across the Mediterranean, a city in North Africa, Carthage. Carthage was a city founded by Phoenicians. It possessed excellent navigation skills, became wealthy through trade, and commanded a powerful navy. Hispania, Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica. It controlled the western Mediterranean and its interests clashed with Rome. Sicily Island, a large island just below the Italian peninsula, rich in grain, and strategically important. The east of the island was influenced by Greek cities, the west by Carthage. A small conflict arose. Mercenaries from Syracuse occupied Messina. Carthage intervened, and Rome was also requested to help. The Senate worried. Intervening in Sicily would mean war with Carthage. They would have to fight naval battles, and Rome's navy was weak. But they decided they would help Messina, sent an army, and war began. In 264 BC, the First Punic War began. Punic meant Phoenician in Latin and signified war with Carthage. Rome began building ships. Copying a stranded Carthaginian warship, They rapidly built vessels and created a fleet of over 100 ships. But they lacked navigation skills, so they developed new tactics and created a device called the corvus, a raven's beak-shaped bridge. They hooked it onto enemy ships. Soldiers crossed over and fought, turning naval battles into land battles. In 260 BC, Rome won at the Battle of Mylae. They defeated the Carthaginian fleet, captured 50 ships, and shook control of the Mediterranean. The war continued for 23 years, on land, at sea, in Sicily and North Africa. They fought. Storms swallowed fleets, tens of thousands drowned in the sea, and both sides grew weary. In 241 BC, Rome launched a final attack. A naval battle occurred near the Aegates Islands. The Roman fleet won, and Carthage surrendered. The First Punic War ended. Sicily became Rome's first province. Not Roman land but foreign territory. Ruled by Rome, taxes were collected, and governors were dispatched. Rome had now gone beyond Italy. It had advanced into the Mediterranean and began taking the shape of an empire. But Carthage dreamed of revenge. There was a general named Hannibal Barca. People called him Hannibal, and that name came to mean terror. As a child he followed his father to Hispania. He swore before an altar and vowed never to regard Rome as a friend. Young Hannibal commanded armies in Hispania. He was a brilliant strategist, earned the trust of his soldiers, and won victory after victory. In 218 BC, Hannibal attacked Saguntum, a Roman allied city. Rome protested, sent envoys to Carthage, and demanded they hand over Hannibal. The Carthaginian Senate refused. The Second Punic War began. Hannibal made a daring plan. He would go not by sea, but by land, and decided to invade Italy by crossing the Alps. He departed from Hispania. He led 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 elephants. He crossed the Pyrenees, fought Gallic tribes while advancing, and crossed the Rhone River. Autumn came. The Alps appeared before him, snow began falling, and cold set in. They climbed narrow mountain paths. Cliffs were beside them, avalanches occurred, and men, horses, and elephants fell to their deaths. Mountain tribes attacked. They rolled boulders, shot arrows, and plundered supplies. After 15 days they crossed the mountains. The plains of northern Italy came into view, and Hannibal led his army down. But his forces had greatly diminished. Only 20,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry remained. Most elephants had died, and the army was exhausted. Rome was shocked. They had not thought he would cross the Alps, were not prepared, and hastily sent armies. The first battle occurred at the Ticinus River. Hannibal's cavalry defeated Roman cavalry. A consul was wounded, and the Roman army retreated. They fought again at the Trebia River. Hannibal used ambush tactics, surrounded the Roman army, and won a great victory. Winter passed and spring came. Hannibal moved south. They had to cross marshlands, walked through water for 4 days, and many soldiers fell ill. Hannibal himself lost one eye. It became infected, could not be treated, and he went blind in that eye. But he continued forward. He waited for the Roman army near Lake Trasimene. It was a foggy morning. The Roman army marched along the lakeside path, and Hannibal gave the attack signal. It was an ambush. Gallic soldiers descended from the hills and charged. The Roman army fell into chaos, and 15,000 died. Terror spread through Rome. It was the third defeat. Hannibal seemed to be coming to Rome, and people were afraid. The Senate held an emergency meeting. They decided to appoint a dictator, and General Fabius Maximus was chosen. Fabius used a new strategy. He did not fight Hannibal head-on, followed from a distance watching, and cut supply lines. It was a delaying tactic. He was nicknamed the Delayer. People criticized him as cowardly, but Fabius continued. Time passes. In 216 BC, Rome raised a great army again. 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry, the largest scale in Roman history, and they were determined to finish Hannibal. They met near a small town called Cannae. Hannibal's forces were less than half. Only 40,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry, numerically greatly inferior. But Hannibal had a plan. The battle began. Hannibal's center slowly retreated. The Roman army pushed in, and concentrated in the center. Cavalry on both wings defeated the Roman cavalry. They came back and struck the Roman army from behind, completely surrounded them, and the trap was complete. The Roman army was trapped helplessly. They could not escape, were crushed to death or stabbed, and a massacre occurred. More than 50,000 died. One of two consuls died, dozens of senators died, and it was the worst defeat in Roman history. Hannibal was victorious. It was a perfect battle of encirclement and annihilation, was recorded in later military textbooks, and became a tactical masterpiece. Rome fell into panic. Hannibal seemed to be coming to Rome, the city seemed about to fall, and people despaired. But Hannibal did not go to Rome. His forces were insufficient, he lacked siege equipment, and supply was difficult. Instead he traveled through southern Italy trying to break Roman alliances. Some cities turned to Carthage's side. Capua welcomed Hannibal, some southern Greek cities allied with him, and Syracuse in Sicily also rebelled. But most allied cities remained with Rome. Though afraid, they kept their loyalty, trusted Rome, and did not betray. Rome did not give up. They raised new armies, recruited young men, and even armed slaves. Though money was scarce, wealthy citizens offered their fortunes, and everyone pooled their strength. They used Fabius's strategy again. They did not fight Hannibal directly, fought only small battles, and cut supply lines. For 15 years Hannibal remained in Italy. He neither won nor lost, the stalemate continued, and time passed. Rome prepared a counterattack. A young general stepped forward. A man with a long name, Publius Cornelius Scipio, and people called him Scipio. Scipio had survived the Battle of Cannae. He studied Hannibal's tactics, dreamed of revenge, and waited for his chance. Scipio crossed to Hispania. He attacked Carthaginian territory, won victories, and conquered Hispania. Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal led reinforcements and crossed the Alps. But he was stopped by Roman forces, was defeated at the Battle of Metaurus, and died. Scipio crossed to North Africa. He threatened Carthage itself, approached near the city, and pressured Carthage. Carthage called Hannibal back. After 15 years Hannibal left Italy, returned to his homeland, and prepared for a final battle. In 202 BC, two generals met on the plains of Zama. Hannibal and Scipio, the victor of Cannae and the conqueror of Hispania. Two genius strategists faced each other. Battle was joined. Scipio had learned Hannibal's tactics. He opened his center to let the elephant charge flow through, attacked flanks with cavalry, and used encirclement tactics. Hannibal was defeated. His first and last defeat, Carthage surrendered, and the Second Punic War ended. Carthage had to pay enormous reparations, had to burn its fleet, had to give up Hispania, and virtually lost its status as an independent nation. Rome was victorious. Scipio became a hero, received the title Africanus, and held a triumph. Rome was now the absolute power of the Western Mediterranean. It also turned its eyes eastward. There were kingdoms of Greece, Macedonia, and Asia Minor. Nations ruled by successors of Alexander the Great, wealthy and civilized, and fighting among themselves. Rome intervened. Under the pretext of helping Greek cities, it plunged into war and won victories. It defeated King Philip of Macedonia, repelled King Antiochus of Syria, and extended influence over the eastern Mediterranean. Roman legions set foot on Greek soil. Land of philosophers, home of artists, land of brilliant civilization. Roman soldiers were amazed seeing Greek temples. Beautiful sculptures, exquisite architecture, elegant culture filled them with admiration. Greece was conquered but conquered Rome. With culture, with thought, with language, it transformed Rome. Roman nobles learned Greek. They studied philosophy, hired Greek teachers, and admired Greek culture. The poet Horace said, "Captive Greece captured her savage conqueror." Time passes. Over 200 years Rome had gone from a small city to a vast republic. I had unified Italy, gained Sicily, and conquered Hispania. It had extended influence to North Africa, Greece, and Asia Minor, and the Mediterranean was becoming Rome's lake. But war changed Rome. Wealth flowed in. War prisoners became slaves, plundered. Gold and silver came to Rome, and nobles grew wealthy. Large estates arose. Called latifundia, hundreds of slaves worked them, and nobles owned them. Small farmers lost their land. When they returned from war their fields were ruined, they were burdened by debt, and had to sell their land. People flooded to Rome, seeking work, seeking food, they came to the city. Rome grew. A population approaching 1 million gathered, streets became crowded, and slums appeared. The gap between rich and poor widened. Nobles lived in marble mansions, commoners lived in cramped apartment buildings, and discontent accumulated. Political conflict also deepened. Senate aristocrats and popular factions opposed each other, power struggles erupted, and the republic began to shake. The sun is setting. Sunset illuminates the hills of Rome. Red light colors the temple columns, shadows lengthen, and the day comes to an end. The Tiber River flows slowly, unchangingly, as if flowing forever. People return from the Forum Square. Merchants close their shops. Senators walk wrapped in togas, and children run about. The night of Rome arrives. The sky darkens, stars appear one by one, and moonlight illuminates the city. Candles are lit in temples, lamps are lit in every house, and Rome prepares for sleep. The wind blows gently, quietly, across the hills. Olive tree leaves sway in the wind, insect sounds come from vineyards, and the peaceful night continues. The thousand-year city breathes. History accumulates, years flow, and time passes slowly. From a distance comes the voice of a watchman. The night deepens. Footsteps walking the walls, the sound of flowing river, quiet sounds heard through the nights around Rome. 146 years before Christ, Carthage was completely destroyed. It was a city where 500,000 people had lived. Buildings collapsed, flames rose high, and people fled. Roman legions searched the city thoroughly. They enslaved the survivors, burned the temples, and tore down the walls. After the war ended, Romans are said to have sown salt so the land would never grow grain again. So the name Carthage would disappear forever. A city erased without trace. Only the wind blew there. Rome had become master of the Mediterranean. The same year, war also ended in the east. Mainland Greece became a Roman province. The city of Corinth burned, and treasures were carried to Rome. Greece, which had once illuminated the world, land of philosophers, home of artists, now submitted to Rome. But Greek culture survived. Romans learned Greek culture. They studied the Greek language, read Greek philosophy, and admired Greek sculpture. Nobles hired Greek teachers. They taught their children Homer, had them read Plato, and made them learn Greek refinement. The poet Horace said, "Captive Greece captured her savage conqueror." Rome grew larger and larger. To the west, to the mountains of Hispania, to the east, to the coastal cities of Asia Minor, to the south, across all of North Africa. The wide Mediterranean was becoming Rome's sea. People called it our sea. As territory expanded, wealth also increased. War prisoners became slaves. Tens of thousands were dragged to Italy, worked on large estates, and died in mines. Gold and silver plundered from wars flowed into Rome. Greek sculptures, Syrian silk, Egyptian grain were carried on ships. Wealthy nobles expanded their lands. They owned large estates in Sicily, in Hispania, in Africa, employed slaves, and gained enormous profits. Latifundia. It meant large estates, vast farmlands where hundreds of slaves worked. But small farmers lost their land. Farmers who went to war and returned. Their fields were ruined, debts accumulated, and eventually they had to sell their land. People who lost their land flooded to Rome, seeking work, seeking food, seeking hope. Rome grew. A population approaching 1 million gathered, streets became crowded, and slums appeared. Insula. It meant apartment buildings, structures with narrow dark rooms stacked in layers. Poor people lived there, earning a living day by day, wandering in search of work, living while worrying about tomorrow. The gap between rich and poor widened. On Palatine Hill stood marble mansions, wide gardens, fountains, sculptures, mosaic floors, and dozens of slaves serving. In Subora district, poor people lived together. Narrow alleys, crumbling buildings, stinking sewers, and people living in poverty. Discontent accumulated. In 133 BC, Tribune Tiberius Gracchus stepped forward. People called him Gracchus. Gracchus proposed reform. Let us distribute public land to poor citizens. Let us limit the size of land one person can own. Senate nobles opposed. They were using public land as virtually their own, did not want to give it up, and considered Gracchus an enemy. Gracchus appealed directly to the assembly. Commoners welcomed him enthusiastically, The bill passed, and land distribution began. But the nobles' anger grew. Gracchus tried to extend his tribunate. It was unprecedented. Rumors spread that he dreamed of dictatorship, and tension mounted. One day, Senate members appeared leading a mob. Gracchus and his supporters were gathered on Capitoline Hill. Violence erupted, clubs and stones flew, and blood flowed. Gracchus died. He was murdered along with 300 supporters, and their bodies were thrown into the Tiber River. For the first time in Roman history, political violence occurred. A square stained with blood, bodies floating down the river, people trembling with fear. The era of peaceful politics was ending. 10 years passed. In 123 BC, Gracchus's brother Gaius Gracchus became tribune. Gaius inherited his brother's will. He continued land reform, tried to lower grain prices, and sought to give citizenship to more people. He was bolder. He created new courts to check the Senate, shared power with the equestrian class, and restricted noble privileges. Commoners were enthusiastic, but nobles grew more fearful, organized opposition forces, and watched for opportunities. In 121 BC, a clash occurred. The Senate declared a state of emergency, gave special powers to the consul, and ordered protect the republic. Gaius and his supporters took refuge on Aventine Hill. The army surrounded them, fighting broke out, and 3,000 died. Gaius gave an order to his slave, "Kill me." The slave stabbed his master with a sword, then took his own life. The Gracchus brothers' reforms all ended in blood. But the problems did not disappear. The gap between rich and poor grew wider, political conflict deepened, and violence became routine. The Roman Republic was shaking. Time passes. In 107 BC, a crisis came from the north. Germanic tribes moved south in large numbers. The Cimbri and Teutones, hundreds of thousands of warriors moving toward the Alps. Roman armies tried to stop them but were heavily defeated. 80,000 died at the Battle of Arausio. All Gaul trembled with terror, and Italy was threatened. Rome fell into panic. General Gaius Marius stepped forward. People called him Marius. Marius reformed the army. Previously only citizens with property could become soldiers. They had to buy weapons and armor with their own money, and had to own land to enter the army. Marius changed this. He allowed people without property to become soldiers. The state provided weapons and pay, and promised land after discharge. Poor citizens flooded to the army. It was an opportunity to get work, receive pay, and obtain land. Professional soldiers were born. He intensified training. March drills, trench digging, camp construction, repeated daily, and soldiers grew strong. He changed the legion structure. He reorganized into centuries, cohorts, and legions, and flexible, powerful combat units were created. Marius's army met the Germanic tribes. In 102 BC, he defeated the Teutones at the Battle of Aquae Sexti. The next year, he annihilated the Cimbri at the Battle of Vercellae. More than 100,000 died. Rome was saved, and Marius became a hero. Marius was elected consul 5 times. It was unprecedented. People called him savior of Rome, and power concentrated in him. But the army had changed. Soldiers now followed their general rather than the state. Because the general was the one who gave pay, promised land, and distributed spoils. Legions were becoming generals' private armies. The center of power was beginning to shift. Not the Senate but the army, not law but the sword gained power. In 88 BC, Marius and Sulla clashed. Lucius Cornelius Sulla. People called him Sulla, a brilliant general of noble birth. War broke out in the east. King Mithridates of Pontus rebelled, massacred Romans in Asia Minor, and threatened Greece. Who would command the eastern campaign? The Senate chose Sulla, the assembly supported Marius, and the two collided. Sulla led his army and marched on Rome. It was the first time in Roman history. Roman legions attacked Rome, fighting occurred in the streets, and blood flowed. Marius fled. He went into exile in Africa. Sulla took control of Rome, and departed for the east. While Sulla was away, Marius returned. He entered Rome with an army, began revenge, and massacred Sulla's supporters. Slaughter continued for 5 days. Senators, knights, and citizens died in the streets, bodies piled up, and terror covered the city. Marius became consul for the 7th time. But he died 15 days later, at 71 years old. In 83 BC, Sulla returned from the east. He had defeated Mithridates, reclaimed Greece, and returned prepared for revenge. Civil war erupted across Italy. Marians and Sullans fought, cities burned, and tens of thousands died. In 82 BC, Sulla was victorious. Entering Rome, Sulla took more thorough revenge. He published public execution lists, proscriptio, meaning lists of the proscribed. Anyone on the list could be killed by anyone. Killers were given rewards, and property was confiscated. More than 4,000 names went up. Senators, knights, and wealthy citizens were included, and the hunt began. People died in the streets, in homes, in temples. Sons denounced fathers, slaves killed masters, and neighbors betrayed neighbors. Terror ruled Rome. Sulla became dictator. He held unlimited power, stood above the law, and tried to rebuild Rome. He strengthened the Senate's authority. He limited tribune power, reduced assembly influence, and tried to restore a nobility-centered system. But 3 years later, Sulla stepped down voluntarily. He laid down power, returned to the countryside, and quietly spent his remaining years. He died the next year, at 60 years old. What Sulla had shown: that one with an army could rule Rome, that law and tradition were powerless before the sword. The Republic's crack steepened further. In 73 BC, a new crisis arrived. Gladiator Spartacus rebelled. 70 gladiators escaped from a gladiator school in Capua. They fled to Mount Vesuvius, obtained weapons, and began resistance. Escaped slaves joined them. Slaves who had fled from farms, from mines, from houses, gathered, and became thousands. Spartacus led them. He was a gladiator from Thrace, an outstanding warrior, and people followed him. Roman armies came to suppress them. But Spartacus won, seized weapons, and grew stronger. The rebel force swelled. It grew to 70,000, 100,000, 120,000, and swept through the Italian peninsula. For 2 years they defeated Roman armies repeatedly. They defeated consular armies, gained spoils, and controlled southern Italy. Wealthy Romans were afraid. Slaves were winning, order was collapsing, and terror spread. Rich man Crassus led an army out. Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was the wealthiest person in Rome, had ambition, and wanted honor. He raised an army of 40,000. He trained them strictly, punished, defeated units by decimation, and controlled through fear. Pompey also returned from Hispania. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus. People called him Pompey, meaning Pompey the Great. At a young age he had led many wars to victory, received Sulla's favor, and was a rising general. In 71 BC, Spartacus retreated southward. He tried to cross to Sicily, but pirates betrayed him. He was trapped, and prepared for a final battle. Crassus's army pursued. They clashed in Lucania, fierce battle occurred, and Spartacus died in combat. 6,000 prisoners were captured. All were crucified, and crosses lined the road from Capua to Rome on both sides. A road 200 kilometers long. Bodies hanging on crosses swayed in the wind, birds flew in, and terror was conveyed. It was a warning to slaves. Do not rebel, obey. This is the price of treason. Spartacus's rebellion ended. But Crassus and Pompey watched each other. Who was the victor? Who had achieved greater merit? Competition began. In 70 BC, the two became consuls together. But they did not trust each other, did not cooperate, and divided power. Time passes. In 63 BC, Pompey won victories in the east. He completely defeated Mithridates, conquered Syria, and entered Jerusalem. He gained enormous spoils. Gold, silver, jewels, and artworks were carried to Rome, and Pompey became a hero. He held a triumph, a procession that lasted 2 days. Prisoners were led in, treasures were displayed, and Roman citizens cheered. Pompey stood at the pinnacle of power. But the Senate feared him. He was too strong, too popular, and they worried he might become a dictator like Sulla. They refused Pompey's demands. They blocked a bill to give land to veteran soldiers, delayed reorganization of eastern conquests, and isolated Pompey. Pompey was furious. Just then, a man appeared. Gaius Julius Caesar. People called him Caesar. Caesar was of noble birth, but he was not wealthy, had many debts, and had great ambition. He was an outstanding orator, had charisma, and knew how to captivate people's hearts. He supported the popular faction. He was Marius's nephew by marriage, had been on Sulla's proscription list, but survived, and quietly watched for opportunities. Caesar proposed, joined hands with Pompey and Crassus. In 60 BC, the three formed a secret alliance, the first triumvirate. It meant three heads, an unofficial power coalition. They agreed to help each other. Pompey provided military power, Crassus wealth, and Caesar political skill. Caesar became consul. He passed the land law for Pompey's soldiers, helped Crassus's business, and built his own power base. The next year, Caesar went out as governor of Gaul. The term was 5 years, but could be extended. He could command armies, and it was an opportunity to gain wealth and fame. Gaul, today's France, Belgium, and Switzerland, where Celtic tribes lived, land not submitted to Rome. Caesar began conquest. For 8 years, he fought endlessly, won repeatedly, and conquered all of Gaul. He defeated the Helvetii. He repelled Germanic tribes, built a bridge over the Rhine and crossed it, and invaded Britannia twice. 1 million are said to have died. 1 million became slaves, and Gaul became a Roman province. Caesar wrote the Gallic Wars. He recorded his achievements, sent them to Rome, and people read them. The sentences were concise and clear. I came, I saw, I conquered. His fame grew. Meanwhile in Rome, changes occurred. In 53 BC, Crassus went on a Parthian campaign. He wanted eastern glory, wanted to catch up with Pompey and Caesar, and chose war. He was heavily defeated at the Battle of Carrhae. 40,000 Roman soldiers died, 10,000 were captured, and Crassus also died. The triumvirate broke. Only Pompey and Caesar remained. The two grew apart, suspected each other, and collision approached. In 52 BC, Pompey's wife Julia died. She was Caesar's daughter. The tie connecting the two men, and her death worsened their relationship. The Senate sided with Pompey. They feared Caesar, wanted to eliminate him, and decided to use Pompey. In 49 BC, the Senate ordered Caesar, disband your army and return to Rome. Your term as governor has ended, so return as a private citizen. If Caesar refused, it was treason. Coming to Rome while maintaining his army was also treason. Caesar had to choose the border between Gaul and Italy. The Rubicon River flowed there. It was a small river, but the law was clear: crossing this river armed was treason, and irreversible. Caesar stood at the riverbank with his army. It was night. Moonlight illuminated the river water. The sound of water was heard, and history held its breath. Caesar said, "The die is cast." He crossed the river. Civil war began. Pompey and the Senate were shocked. They were not prepared, lacked armies, and abandoned Rome and fled. Caesar entered Rome. He spilled no blood, showed clemency, and continued pursuit. Pompey fled to Greece. He gathered armies, gathered senators, and prepared counterattack. In 48 BC, two armies met on the plains of Pharsalus. Pompey's army was larger, 45,000 troops, many cavalry, and they were confident of victory. Caesar had only 22,000, but they were elite soldiers who had fought together in Gaul, trusted Caesar, and did not fear death. Battle was joined. Caesar won. He repelled Pompey's cavalry, surrounded his infantry, and achieved perfect victory. Pompey fled. He escaped to Egypt, asked the pharaoh for help, and landed on the beach. But the Egyptians killed him. To curry favor with Caesar, they cut off his head and sent it to Caesar. Caesar arrived in Egypt. He received Pompey's head, is said to have shed tears, and mourned the man who had been his former friend and colleague. In Egypt he met Queen Cleopatra. She was young and beautiful, wise, and Caesar fell in love. They traveled the Nile River together. They took boats up the river, saw ancient temples, and spent time together. But war was not over. Rebellion arose in Asia Minor. A prince of Pontus raised an army. Caesar went to suppress it, and won quickly. Caesar reported to Rome, "I came, I saw, I conquered." He also fought in North Africa. Pompeian remnants resisted. Caesar crossed over and crushed them, and won at the Battle of Thapsus. He also fought in Hispania. Pompey's sons rebelled. Caesar suppressed them, and won final victory at the Battle of Munda. 4 years of civil war ended. Caesar returned to Rome. Enemies had disappeared, opposition had collapsed, and he became Rome's absolute ruler. He became dictator for life. He held unlimited power, stood above the Senate, and was effectively king. He began reforms. He changed the calendar. He created the Julian calendar, set the year at 365 days, and laid the foundation for calendars continuing to today. He built buildings. He created a new forum, erected temples, and beautified the city. He established colonies. He sent veteran soldiers to various places, founded new cities, and stabilized the empire. He reorganized laws. He rooted out corruption, improved administration, and created efficient governance. He showed clemency. He forgave enemies, accepted Pompeians, and pursued reconciliation. But rumors spread that he wanted to become king. Antony offered him a crown, but he refused. He showed refusal 3 times, but people were suspicious. Senators were afraid. The Republic was ending, freedom was disappearing, and Caesar was too powerful. A conspiracy was formed. Brutus participated. Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar had cherished like a son, a man he had respected. Cassius led it. Gaius Cassius Longinus, he hated Caesar, tried to preserve the Republic, and gathered comrades. More than 60 senators joined. Each hid a dagger, set a date, and watched for opportunity. March 15, 44 BC. The Ides of March, as Romans called it. A Senate meeting was held. In a building next to Pompey's theater, Caesar entered, and senators surrounded him. Cimber presented a petition. While Caesar read it, it was the signal, and Casca drew his knife first. He stabbed at the neck but missed. Caesar resisted in surprise. Other senators rushed in, and daggers rained down. He was stabbed 23 times. Blood flowed. Caesar staggered, and fell beneath Pompey's statue. Brutus also held a knife. Caesar saw Brutus. "You too, Brutus," he is said to have spoken in Greek. They were his last words. He covered his face with his toga, and died. He was 56 years old. The assassins came outside. "The tyrant is dead. Freedom is restored," they shouted, holding bloody daggers. But people fled, streets emptied, and only silence flowed. The assassins believed they had regained freedom. But the Republic did not return. Caesar's deputy Marcus Antonius, people called him Antony, he spoke at the funeral. He read Caesar's will, showed the torn toga, and stirred people's emotions. Was Caesar ambitious? Did Caesar not love us? The crowd was enraged. They burned the assassins' houses, rioted in the streets, and cried for revenge. Brutus and Cassius fled. They left Rome, escaped eastward, and gathered armies. Caesar's will was made public. There was someone adopted as son. Gaius Octavius, Caesar's nephew, an 18-year-old youth. Octavius came to Rome. He inherited Caesar's name, became Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, and people called him Octavian. He was young but had great ambition. Caesar's soldiers gathered to him. He inherited the fortune, and vowed revenge. Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. The 3 met. In 43 BC, they formed the Second Triumvirate. This time it was official, recognized by law, given a 5-year term, and they divided the empire in 3. And they began revenge. Proscriptio was announced again. 300 senators, 2,000 knights went on the list, and massacre began. Cicero also died. The great orator, defender of the Republic, a man who had denounced Antony. He was caught fleeing. His head was cut off, and his hands were also cut off and displayed in the Forum. Terror covered Rome again. In 42 BC, the triumvirate's combined forces crossed eastward. They met the armies of Brutus and Cassius at Philippi. 2 battles occurred, the Republican faction was defeated, and Brutus and Cassius committed suicide. All of Caesar's assassins had disappeared. They divided the empire. Octavian took the west, Antony the east, and Lepidus Africa. But peace did not last long. Antony went to the east. He met Cleopatra in Egypt, fell in love, and began living together. He had a Roman wife, Octavia, Octavian's sister, but Antony chose Cleopatra. Romans were outraged. He had betrayed Rome, fallen for an Egyptian queen, and they condemned him for trying to become king of the East. Octavian seized the opportunity. He waged propaganda war, made Antony an enemy, and prepared for war. In 31 BC, the Battle of Actium occurred. Off the western coast of Greece, near the promontory of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet met Octavian's fleet. 200 ships versus 400, numerically inferior, wind was unfavorable, and morale was low. Battle began. Cleopatra's ships suddenly retreated. The Egyptian fleet left the battlefield, Antony followed, and the remaining fleet fell into chaos. Octavian won. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt. They returned to Alexandria, locked the gates, and waited for their end. The next year, Octavian invaded Egypt. Antony killed himself. He stabbed his stomach with a sword, died beside Cleopatra, and was 53 years old. Cleopatra also died from an asp bite. She was 39 years old, the last pharaoh of Egypt's Ptolemaic dynasty. A dynasty that had lasted 300 years ended. Egypt became a Roman province, and the entire Mediterranean submitted to Rome. Octavian. Now he stood alone. All enemies had disappeared, there were no competitors, and he became Rome's absolute ruler. In 27 BC, the Senate offered him a new title, Augustus. It meant the venerable one, the one to be revered. Octavian now became Augustus. The Republic had ended. 100 years of civil war ended, and the age of empire began. But Augustus was cautious. "I have restored the Republic." He said this, outwardly maintained republican forms, and called himself first citizen instead of emperor. The Senate also remained. Consuls were still elected, assemblies still met, and traditions continued. But real power belonged to Augustus. He controlled the army, controlled finances, and all decisions came from him. Peace arrived. He stabilized the borders. He made the Rhine and Danube rivers boundaries, blocked Germanic tribes, and protected the empire. He maintained roads. He laid roads throughout the empire, created relay stations, and news traveled quickly. He built cities. "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble." Temples, forums, theaters, and aqueducts were erected. Rome became beautiful, and took on an appearance worthy of the empire's capital. Literature and art flourished. Virgil wrote the Aeneid, the story of Trojan hero Aeneas founding Rome, singing of Rome's destiny, and it became a masterpiece of Latin literature. Horace loved poetry. He sang of life's wisdom, nature's beauty, and the value of moderation, and people recited his verses. Ovid wrote love poetry. He reinterpreted mythology with metamorphoses, displayed imagination, and influenced later generations. Livy recorded history. From Rome's founding to the present, he left a massive 142-volume history, and transmitted Rome's glory. An age of peace. Pax Romana began. For over 40 years Augustus ruled. War stopped, prosperity came, and people lived in stability. In the year 14, Augustus died. He was 76 years old. He quietly closed his eyes in a villa near Nola, and his wife Livia was by his side. His last words are told. "Did I play my part well?" Like an actor leaving the stage, Augustus left the world. His adopted son Tiberius succeeded him. He was 55 years old, an experienced general, and carefully inherited power. The age of the Roman Empire. Now it truly began. The sun is setting. Sunset illuminates the hills of Rome. Red light colors marble temples, shadows lengthen, and the day comes to an end. The Tiber River flows slowly, unchangingly, as if flowing forever. The Forum Square grows quiet. Merchants close their shops, people return home, and stillness comes to the streets. The night of Rome arrives. The sky darkens, stars appear one by one, and moonlight illuminates the city. Candles are lit in temples, lamps are lit in every house, and the peaceful night continues. The wind blows gently, quietly, across the hills. Olive tree leaves sway in the wind. Insect sounds come from vineyards, and Rome breathes. The 1,000-year city falls asleep. History accumulates, years flow, and time passes slowly. From a distance comes the voice of a watchman. The night deepens. Footsteps walking the walls, the sound of flowing river, quiet sounds heard through the night surround Rome. The year 14. The year Augustus left the world. His adopted son Tiberius became emperor. He was 55 years old, an experienced general, and carefully inherited power. Tiberius was a capable ruler. He stabilized finances, protected borders, and managed the empire efficiently. But he did not like Rome. He distrusted senators, feared conspiracies, and grew increasingly isolated. As he aged, his suspicion deepened. He executed many on charges of treason, ruled through terror, and people were afraid. In the year 26, Tiberius left Rome. He went to the island of Capri, spent his remaining years there, and never returned to Rome. He lived in a palace on a cliff overlooking the sea. Lonely, solitary, holding power. In the year 37, Tiberius died. He was 77 years old, had ruled for 23 years, and his great-nephew Caligula succeeded him. Gaius Caesar. People called him Caligula. It meant little boots, because as a child he grew up in military camps, with his father wearing small soldier's boots. He was a young emperor of 24. People welcomed him, held hopes, and expected a new era. At first he was generous. He recalled people Tiberius had exiled, held gladiator games, and distributed gifts to the people. But he changed. After suffering an illness, his character is said to have altered. He became cruel, capricious, and madness appeared. He called himself a god. He built temples for his own worship, erected golden statues, and demanded sacrifices. He tried to appoint his horse as a senator. A favorite steed named Incitatus, it lived in a marble stable and ate from golden bowls. He wasted finances. He held lavish feasts, built ships and floated them on lakes, and threw treasures into the sea. He humiliated senators. He executed them, confiscated property, and ruled through terror. After 4 years the Praetorian Guard rebelled. Caligula was murdered. His wife and young daughter were also killed, and chaos came. The Praetorian Guard searched for a new emperor. They found a man hiding behind palace curtains, dragged him out, and proclaimed him emperor. It was Claudius. He was Tiberius's nephew, 50 years old, a man who had lived his whole life being ignored. He stammered, limped, and people considered him a fool. But he was wise. He studied history, understood law, and knew how to govern. For 13 years he ruled the empire well. He improved administration, built aqueducts, and expanded ports. He conquered Britannia. The island Caesar had invaded twice, but failed to conquer. Claudius completed, and it became a new province. But he had problems with women. He married 4 times. His last wife was Agrippina, an ambitious woman. Agrippina had a son from a previous husband, a boy named Nero. Claudius adopted him as son, and named him successor. In the year 54, Claudius died. Rumors spread of poisoning. It was whispered that Agrippina fed him poisoned mushrooms, and the truth was unknown. Nero became emperor. He was 17 years old, the youngest emperor in Roman history, and his mother Agrippina controlled from behind. The first 5 years were good. He had wise advisors, Seneca taught him, and the empire was peaceful. Nero loved art. He sang, played the lyre, and wrote poetry. But he feared his mother. Agrippina held power, interfered, and tried to control. In the year 59, Nero killed his mother. First he tried to sink her ship, but failed, eventually sent assassins, and Agrippina was murdered. After that Nero changed. He killed his wife. He divorced and killed Octavia, and remarried Poppaea. He killed Poppaea too. While she was pregnant he kicked her to death in anger, regretted it but could not undo it. In the year 64, a great fire broke out in Rome. It was a summer night. Fire started, spread on the wind, and burned for 6 days. 3/4 of Rome became ashes. Houses collapsed, temples burned, and thousands died. People suspected Nero. Rumors spread that the emperor started the fire. It was whispered for rebuilding Rome, and anger grew. Nero searched for scapegoats. He blamed Christians, people who believed a new religion, teachings from Judea, who did not worship Roman gods. He arrested Christians. He accused them of arson, executed them cruelly, and killed them in public execution grounds. He threw them to beasts, crucified them, and covered them with tar and burned them alive. He used them as garden torches at night, made them spectacles, and spread terror. But people felt sympathy. It was too cruel, they seemed innocent, and hatred for Nero deepened. Nero began reconstruction. He built a golden palace, Domus Aurea, meaning house of gold, with vast gardens and lakes, and a giant statue was erected. Finally I can live like a human being, Nero said, but the people were starving, Taxes rose, and discontent accumulated. In the year 68, rebellion arose. The governor of Gaul raised the standard, the governor of Hispania joined, and the army abandoned Nero. The Senate declared Nero a public enemy. The Praetorian Guard also betrayed. The emperor was left alone, and fled. He hid in a slave's house outside Rome. Pursuers approached, Nero put a dagger to his throat, and a slave helped thrust it in. "What an artist dies in me." They were his last words. He was 31 years old, the last emperor of the Julian line. A time of chaos arrived. From the year 68 to 69, in 1 year 4 emperors changed. Galba became emperor. He was a 72-year-old man, strict and unpopular. He was murdered after 3 months. Otho became emperor, and 3 months later Vitellius defeated him. Legions in each region proclaimed their own generals emperor. Civil war erupted, fighting occurred in Rome, and blood flowed. Eastern legions proclaimed Vespasian emperor. Titus Flavius Vespasianus. People called him Vespasian. He was of common birth, a general suppressing Jewish rebellion, a practical and frugal man. Late in the year 69, Vespasian's army advanced into Italy. They defeated Vitellius, entered Rome, and chaos ended. Vespasian established a new dynasty, the Flavian dynasty. Stability returned, and the empire was rebuilt. He lived frugally. He returned the golden palace to the people, collected taxes reasonably, and said money has no smell. He began building the Colosseum. He filled Nero's lake, began building a massive amphitheater, and tried to leave a gift to Rome. He ruled for 10 years. He stabilized the empire, restored finances, and brought peace. In the year 79, Vespasian died. "Oh, I think I am becoming a god." They were joking last words, mocking the custom that emperors became gods after death. His son Titus became emperor. He was a young and popular emperor, generous, and the people loved him. But disaster came. August 24, the year 79, Mount Vesuvius erupted. In southern Italy, near Naples, the mountain exploded, ash and stone shot into the sky, and clouds spread. There was a city called Pompeii, a wealthy city, with beautiful villas, where 20,000 lived. Ash fell lightly at first, then thicker and thicker, covering houses, filling streets, and choking breath. People fled, but many could not escape in time, died in their homes, and were buried in ash. A pyroclastic surge came. Hot gas and ash over 300 degrees Celsius, swallowing everything instantly, and taking lives. Pompeii disappeared. Buried under 6 meters of volcanic ash, time stopped, and was forgotten for 1800 years. Herculaneum was also buried. Stabii was destroyed, thousands died, and the sky darkened. The writer Pliny observed. Pliny the Younger left a record. His uncle Pliny the Elder went to rescue and died, and history was transmitted. Titus went to relief efforts. He offered personal fortune, helped victims, and supported reconstruction. In the year 80, another disaster came. A great fire broke out in Rome. It burned for 3 nights, many buildings collapsed, and damage was severe. Plague also spread. Many died, terror spread, and the empire suffered trials. Titus did his best. In the year 80, the Colosseum was completed. The Flavian amphitheater, it could hold 50,000, was 4 stories high, a masterpiece of Roman architecture. Festivals were held for 100 days. Gladiator games, beast hunts, mock naval battles occurred, and the people cheered. But Titus soon died. In the year 81, he collapsed with fever, died at 42, and had ruled only 2 years. "I have lost but 1 day," words he said when he had helped no one on a certain day, and he was remembered as a generous emperor. His brother Domitian became emperor. He was capable. He improved administration, protected borders, and governed efficiently. But he was very suspicious. He feared conspiracies, hunted and executed traitors, and ruled through terror. He had himself called Lord and God. He demanded worship, wielded absolute power, and clashed with the Senate. After ruling 15 years, he was assassinated in the year 96. He was killed in the palace. The Praetorian Guard was involved, and his wife is said to have conspired. The Flavian dynasty ended. The Senate chose a new emperor. Nerva, a 65-year-old senator, a moderate and wise man. Nerva adopted a new method. He introduced the adoptive system. He chose successors by ability, not bloodline, adopted the most capable person as son, and prepared the empire's future. He adopted Trajan as son, an outstanding general, from Hispania, the first emperor not born in Rome. In the year 98, Nerva died, and Trajan became emperor. The Golden Age began. Trajan was a conquering emperor. He conquered Dacia to the east, advanced to Mesopotamia, and expanded the Roman Empire to its greatest extent. He fought 2 Dacian wars. He crossed the Danube, conquered mountainous regions, and gained gold mines. He erected Trajan's Column, a column 40 meters high, with spiral carvings, recording the history of war. He also advanced eastward. He fought Parthia, conquered Mesopotamia, and reached the Persian Gulf. "I have gone farther than Alexander." He said so, but it was too vast, difficult to hold, and he soon had to retreat. He was also a generous ruler. He supported poor children, built roads, and erected public buildings. He created Trajan's Forum, a massive square, with markets and libraries, becoming the center of Rome. The best emperor. The Senate called him so, the people also loved him, and he became a model for later emperors. In the year 117, Trajan died in the east. He was 63 years old, on campaign, and fell to illness. His adopted son Hadrian became emperor. Hadrian took a different path. He halted conquest, stabilized borders, and focused on protecting the empire. He gave up some lands Trajan had conquered. He withdrew from Mesopotamia, created defensible borders, and made realistic choices. He built a wall in Britannia. Hadrian's Wall, a stone barrier 117 kilometers long, crossing the island, and blocking northern tribes. He traveled the empire. He spent more than half of his 21-year reign traveling, visited every province, and saw and improved personally. He loved Greece. He rebuilt Athens, built temples, and patronized Greek culture. He had passion for architecture. He rebuilt the Pantheon, built villas, and left beautiful buildings. The Pantheon, it meant temple of all gods, had a massive dome, and a circular opening showing the sky. Perfect proportions, light entered, and it still stands 1900 years later. In the year 138, Hadrian died. He was 62 years old, suffered from illness, and left the empire to his adopted son Antoninus Pius. Antoninus Pius. It meant Antoninus the Pious, a gentle and wise emperor. He ruled peacefully for 23 years. He avoided war, stabilized finances, and cared for the people. He rarely left Rome. He governed quietly, did not indulge in luxury, and lived frugally. The happiest era. Historian Edward Gibbon evaluated it. So, the empire prospered, and peace continued. In the year 161, Antoninus Pius died, and his adopted son Marcus Aurelius became emperor. He was a philosopher-emperor. He studied Stoic philosophy, wrote meditations, and strived to live wisely. When you wake in the morning, tell yourself, today I will meet people who meddle, are ungrateful, and arrogant. He wrote so, understood human weakness, and governed with patience. But it was a time of trials. War broke out with Parthia. They fought on eastern borders, won, but the army brought plague. The Antonine Plague, presumed to be smallpox, it spread throughout the empire, and millions died. Cities emptied, farms became desolate, and the economy shook. Crisis also came from the north. Germanic tribes crossed borders, crossed the Danube, and threatened Italy. Marcus Aurelius personally went to the battlefield. He fought for over 10 years, endured cold and disease, and protected the empire. He wrote meditations on the battlefield. In his tent, under candlelight, writing to himself, pondering how to live. Do not fear death. It is only part of nature. To be angry is to punish yourself for another's mistake. He wrote so, left wisdom, and it was transmitted to later generations. In the year 180, Marcus Aurelius died on the battlefield. He was 58 years old, fell to plague, and his son Commodus became emperor. The era of the 5 good emperors ended. Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius. 5 wise emperors led the empire for 84 years, brought peace and prosperity, and created Rome's golden age. The adoptive system succeeded. Capable people became the next emperor, chosen by merit, not bloodline, and the empire was stabilized. But Marcus Aurelius made a mistake. He made his biological son Commodus successor, not an adoptee. For the first time in 100 years, the emperor was succeeded by bloodline, and disaster began. Commodus, a 19-year-old young emperor, unlike his father, with no interest in governing. He dreamed of being a gladiator. He went down into the Colosseum himself to fight, killed beasts, and wanted applause. He called himself Hercules. He wore a lion's skin, carried a club, and claimed to be a god. He left governance to ministers. Corruption was rampant, power was sold, and chaos came. He wasted finances. He held splendid games, indulged in luxury, and the treasury emptied. He ignored the Senate. He executed members, eliminated opposition, and ruled through terror. After 12 years, in the year 192, he was assassinated. An athlete strangled him after bathing. He died at 31, and the Commodus era ended. The Golden Age came to a close. The sun is setting. Sunset illuminates the hills of Rome. Red light colors marble temples, the Colosseum's shadow lengthens, and the day comes to an end. The Tiber River flows slowly, unchangingly, as if flowing forever. The Forum Square grows quiet. Merchants close their shops, people return home, and stillness comes to the streets. The night of Rome arrives. The sky darkens, stars appear one by one, and moonlight illuminates the city. Candles are lit in temples, lamps are lit in every house, and the peaceful night continues. The wind blows gently, quietly, across the hills. Olive tree leaves sway in the wind, insect sounds come from vineyards, and Rome breathes. The 1,000-year city falls asleep. History accumulates, years flow, and time passes slowly. From a distance comes the voice of a watchman. The night deepens. Footsteps walking the walls, the sound of flowing river, quiet sounds heard through the nights around Rome. The year 193. Rome fell into chaos again. After Commodus was murdered, 5 emperors changed in 1 year. General Septimius Severus from North Africa. He received the army's support and became emperor. The Severan dynasty began. He raised soldiers' pay. He strengthened the army. It was to protect the empire's borders. Severus told his sons, "Enrich the soldiers. Nothing else matters." His son Caracalla succeeded him. In the year 212, he gave Roman citizenship to all free men. People throughout the empire now became Roman citizens, but it was also to collect more taxes. The Severan dynasty ended in 235. For the next 50 years, about 50 emperors changed. It was the era of soldier emperors. The army made emperors. The army killed emperors. At the borders, barbarian invasions continued. Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine. Persia threatened the eastern frontier. The economy also collapsed. The silver content of coins gradually decreased. Prices soared. Trade was cut off. Cities declined. People returned to the countryside. Large landowners dominated the land. The crisis of the 3rd century. Rome seemed about to collapse. In the year 284, Diocletian became emperor. He began rebuilding the empire. Diocletian divided the empire into 4. It was called the Tetrarchy. 4 rulers governed together. He tried to control prices. He reformed the tax system. He reorganized the army. But he persecuted Christians. The last and most severe persecution. After Diocletian stepped down, civil war broke out again. Several generals fought for power. In the year 312, Constantine won at the Battle of Milvian Bridge. He is said to have seen a cross in the sky. Constantine in 313 issued the Edict of Milan. He legalized Christianity. The persecuted religion could now be freely believed. Constantine built a new capital, the old Greek colony Byzantium. He named it Constantinople. In the year 330, the empire's capital moved eastward. Rome was no longer the empire's center. After Constantine, most emperors believed in Christianity. In the year 395, Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the state religion. Old temples closed their doors. Gods who had endured 1,000 years disappeared. When Theodosius died, the empire split in two: the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. Two sons ruled east and west respectively. They never became one again. At the end of the 4th century, Germanic tribes began mass migration, fleeing pressure from the Huns. Visigoths entered the Balkan Peninsula. In the year 410, they sacked Rome. For the first time in 800 years, Vandals went through Hispania to North Africa. In the 430s, they seized Rome's breadbasket. In the year 450, Attila the Hun invaded Gaul. Roman and Germanic allied forces barely stopped him. The Western Roman Empire grew weaker and weaker. The emperor was in name only. Real power was held by Germanic generals. In the year 476, Germanic mercenary commander Odoacer. He deposed the last emperor. The emperor's name was Romulus Augustulus, the same name as Romulus from the founding myth, the same name as the first emperor Augustus. It was ironic, beginning with Rome's name, ending with Rome's name. Rome that had endured 1,000 years. The Western Roman Empire fell, but in the East, Rome continued to live. The emperors of Constantinople called themselves Roman emperors. Though they spoke Greek, they claimed to be Rome's successors. In the 6th century, Emperor Justinian tried to reclaim old territories. He recovered North Africa and parts of Italy, but war with Persia, a great plague outbreak, the empire weakened again. In the 7th century, Islamic forces arose. They lost Syria and Egypt. They lost all of North Africa. The Eastern Roman Empire grew smaller and smaller. It became a nation centered on Greece and Asia Minor, but it endured another 1,000 years. It came to be called the Byzantine Empire. In the year 1453, Mehmed II of the Ottoman Turks, he besieged Constantinople. The last emperor, Constantine XI, fought on the walls and died in battle. The walls that had protected for 1,000 years fell. The Eastern Roman Empire ended. The name Rome, 2,200 years of history came to a close. But Rome did not disappear. Roman law became the foundation of European law. The ideals of the Republic influenced modern democracy. The Senate, the consuls, the rule of law. These concepts were transmitted to later generations. Latin became the common language of medieval Europe, the language of learning and religion. Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, all came from Latin. More than half of English words have roots in Latin. In architecture too, Rome lives on. Domes and arches, concrete construction techniques, the Colosseum's amphitheater, the arch structure of aqueducts, their traces remain in buildings today. The calendar also came from Rome. The Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, the names of the 12 months of the year, all are in Latin. Political systems also copied Rome. The name Senate, the concept of republic. The United States Capitol resembles the Roman temple. The Roman eagle became the symbol of many nations. The name empire, the title emperor, originated from Roman emperors. Christianity also spread through Rome. The Pope is in Rome. The Roman Catholic Church. Rome remains in the name. Gladiator games, bathhouse culture, roads and bridges. The lives of Romans are embedded in our lives today. All roads lead to Rome. This saying is still used as metaphor, as truth. Rome fell, but Rome's legacy lives on. The roots of Western civilization. Rome is there. Twin brothers nursed by a wolf. A village on a small hill. The story that began there changed the world. A kingdom of 1,000 years. An empire of 1,000 years. Rome's history flows on. The Tiber River still flows. Roman ruins still stand. Sunset illuminates the Colosseum. Shadows fall long. The old glory has disappeared, but the stones remember. Roads countless people have walked. Stones where countless stories are carved. Time flows slowly. The wind blows gently, softly. The sky darkens. Stars appear one by one. The night of Rome is quiet. Into deep history. Slowly we walk. Now you may close your eyes. Comfortably, slowly. Rome's story continues into dreams. Quietly, peacefully, watching over your night.